Hey there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to lesson 9.5. 9.5 is one of those cute lessons where we just give you the formula that solves all types of quadratic formula problems or quadratic equation problems. All the things that we've done so far in chapter 9 have been able to be certain circumstances that might be faster than typing all of the stuff into a calculator, like we're going to show you how to do today. So, information that you are going to want to write down, I should power on this thing, is you're going to want to write down the formula for the quadratic formula. And it's one that hasn't changed forever. So we have our A, we have our B, we have our C when we have things in standard form. A cannot be a zero value, and it just gets plugged into here. It's the opposite of B, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So all we're going to be doing, folks, is just plugging these numbers a, b, and c into these numbers of the formula, doing the math, typing it into a calculator, and giving what the answers are. And that's what this is all about. All right, so let's get rolling. Just like we have been doing in the past, we're going to make sure that things are equal to 0. So this is going to say an x squared minus 2x. We're going to subtract 35 from both sides to get a minus 35, and then equals to 0. So here's my a is equal to 1, b is equal to negative 2, and c is equal to a negative 35. And maybe you might want to practice writing it down. It's the opposite of b, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 AC, and then that whole thing is over 2a's. So we're just going to plug the numbers into the formula. So I wrote down what A, B, and C were. We just got to plug them in. So a opposite of B would be a positive 2 plus or minus. So the square root of square root of B squared. B squared is going to be a negative 2 squared minus a 4 times that a of 1 times the c of negative 35, and then that whole thing is going to be over 2 times the a, which is 1. So then we just need to simplify. You can type all these things into your calculator at this one step right here, or it's a little bit easier to start doing a little bit of the math on our own. I like to simplify what's underneath the square root first to make things easier for us. So 2 squared, a negative 2 squared makes just the stuff in the square root turn into a 4 minus 4 times a negative 35 gets me to, I think, 140. 4 times a negative 35, a negative 140. And then we have our plus or minus a 2 out here, and the whole thing over a 2 still. So if we keep simplifying here, my process turns down to this being a plus. So we get a 144 on the inside of that square root, and we have a 2 plus or minus. All of it's over 2 still. So this turns into a 2 plus or minus square root of 144 is 12 over a 2. So then we have our two situations, 2 plus 12. So we're taking the high road of 2 plus 12, and we get our 14 over 2, which is making us have equal to 7. Or if we take the low road, 2 minus 12, which gets us to a negative 10 over 2, which gets us a final answer of a negative 5. So we'd have our two answers of 7 and negative 5. And these are both our x equals. So x is equal to 7 and x is equal to a negative 5, because those are the two roots for our parabola. So if you remember, that's where we have our spots where they cross on the x-axis. So at 7 and at negative 5. And that's a pretty quick, easy, painless way to do the math here, folks. You can also just, if you talk to me tomorrow about it, we can talk about just how to type that in entirely in one step. But I like to check it in case my math is goofy, because sometimes the numbers are nice, sometimes they're really, really gross. So here's one that you should try on your own. We'll talk about this one in class tomorrow. You're going to choose A, B, C, or D. Just make sure that you plug things in, and like it says, round your answer to the nearest tenth if it's necessary. Now here's another one. We'll do the exact same thing like we did on the previous problem. We have A is equal to a 2, B is equal to a -2, C is equal to a -5. I think it makes it a little bit easier if you just name what those things are and then plug things into the quadratic. So the opposite of B turns into a +2 plus or minus the square root of 2 squared minus 4 times A times C all over 2 times A. And there's a cute little song that we can show you in class tomorrow as well that will help you remember the quadratic formula. And then we're just going to simplify the stuff underneath. So I'm going to have this turned into a 2 plus or minus, and underneath there we have 4 minus, see, it's 8 times 5 is 40. So it's going to turn into a 4 plus 40, because a minus over a 4. So this turns into a 2 plus or minus the square root of 44 over 4. Now the square root of 44 is not a very nice number, so we square root on our calculator 44. It gets us a, you can't read this, but it says 6.6. So I'm going to have a 2 plus or minus a 6.6 and then divided by 4. So if I type in my calculator 2 plus 6.6 and then divided by 4, I get an answer of a 2.2. And if I do 2 minus a 6.6 divided by that 4, I get an answer of a -1.15 or 1.2. So those are my two answers then for my x value, and they tell me exactly where things cross. And that's what this stuff is all about here, folks. So we have other things to share with you. We have this thing called the discriminant. The discriminant is, let me move some of the stuff down here. The discriminant is just the expression underneath the radical sign. So that's the b squared minus 4ac. And what this tells us is if we have one solution, two solutions, or no solutions. So you're going to want to write this stuff down, because again, the discriminant is just the stuff inside the square root. So it's just this piece right here. And what we are going to do, folks, is you need to have this written down. One solution is going to be happening if we have that the discriminant is equal to 0. Two solutions are going to happen is if we have a positive number. And there will be no solutions if we have a negative number. And so part of our math is going to be us just saying, is there one solution, two solutions, or no solutions for these quadratic formulas? So you'll be able to understand that information just by plugging in the b squared minus 4ac to see if it's positive, negative, or 0. And that tells us no, two, or one solutions. Now tomorrow we're also going to give you this for a quick warm-up problem. Oh, here's this one. Just a bunch of information you can write down as well of when to use what method for solving our quadratic equations. The quadratic formula can be used for anything, so that's why we showed it to you last, but these other methods can be used at certain circumstances. So read that. Maybe you want to write them down and determine when you want to use certain methods. Some of them are easier than others. All right, so let's do this problem as well for you guys. You'll try to solve if the discriminant is positive, negative, or 0, and tell me if we have two solutions, one solution, or no solutions just by doing that part underneath the square root symbol in the quadratic formula. All right, folks, this is the Bourbon Nation. That's what we got for you. We are going to help you out tomorrow when you get to class as well. And we are signing off.